And one of the things we talked about yesterday was in order to engage in true dialogue with each other, you have to be willing to relax your grip on certainty. That doesn't mean you drop it, okay? That doesn't mean you take your beliefs and say, I don't believe that anymore. And so that's not necessary, okay? What it does mean is that those things that you strongly believe, you're willing to take another look at those things, okay? And you're willing for someone else to take a look at them. And so we're going to talk about the process for doing that called suspending in just a moment. The problem with my certainty is I can become so certain about what I believe that I won't even listen to you, right? Because why should I talk to you? Because I already know you're wrong, right? And this is what happens in my country right now, in the polarization politically of our country, is that we only talk to people that we think already agree with us. If I use a label and I say you're a Democrat, therefore I'm not going to talk to you because I already know you're wrong, right? But I don't have any. What I'm basically saying is you have nothing to say that I could learn from, and that's a problem. Because if you think about it, there's a lot of pride in that, right? That makes me a very proud person. If I think I've already got the world figured out and there's nothing you can teach me, and therefore you ought to be sitting at my feet listening to what I have to say, or if you're not going to, then just stay away from me, right? Well, what that does is separate us even further. And then what's really interesting is once you start all those separations, then even the people you used to agree with, you find reasons to disagree. And so things become smaller and smaller and smaller and more fragmented, right? More and more separated. And so we have smaller and smaller groups, each insisting that they have the truth. And nobody else does. And so if you don't have the truth, why should I listen to you, right? So, and the problem with that is it leads to violence. It can lead to verbal violence, where I literally show you no respect, and in fact I disrespect you. It can ultimately lead to physical violence. Because if I'm so right and you're so wrong, then why shouldn't I just force you to do what I want, right? And that leads to totalitarianism. And we don't like that, do we? I don't know about you guys, I'm a rebel at heart. I don't like anybody telling me what to do, right? So, there's some practices to enable generative dialogue. And the practice that we talked about yesterday was listening. That was the first practice. And we had some tools. What was the first tool that we?
Mind the gap.
Mind the gap. Okay. What's that about? What's the gap? What gap are we minding? What's the gap?
Between stimulus and response.
Between stimulus and response. Okay. Yeah. When I experience something, and my mental models start to push me to action so that I react, right? I can stop. And actually had one of you was telling me just this morning that you actually had an opportunity to use this, that something happened, got a little upset, and immediately said, nope, I need to slow down. I need to count to 10. And we even talked a little bit this morning over breakfast about the limbic system. And by the way, that was not in your notes, but that's limbic, L-I-M-B-I-C. I think that's right. The limbic system. Thank you. I knew my psychologist buddies in the room would help. And so we talked yesterday. There's even a neurophysiological, right, problem that we have to deal with. And sometimes it's a good thing, right? If it can get me out of danger quickly, that's a good thing. The problem with it is it's when it fires off and I have an immediate emotional response that takes over, that can produce some really bad things. You know, and one of the things we call that is losing your temper, right? That's the way I was raised to think about it is, Randy, don't lose your temper. I used to lose my temper a lot back when I was a lot younger, and so I had to learn about this. What do I do to retain some self-control when I have that fight or flight response. And so as we listen, this idea of listening is about listening first to the voices in my own head, okay? Listening first to my own mental models. It's another way of saying I become reflective. I turn around and look back into myself to say, what's really going on here? What am I feeling? What's happening now? It's to become more observant of who I am and what's happening inside that's making me react the way I react in certain situations. But it also has to do with listening to others and being careful as I listen to others that I'm still aware of what's happening in my own head. And so that's the next tool that I want to share with you, which is the ladder of inference. Okay? So how does the ladder of inference work? And probably the best way to describe it is to tell you a story, and then we'll go back and re-examine it. Okay? We'll go back and look at that story again and sort of pick it apart and make sure we understand what's going on. So for this, I will need, of course, a ladder. Right. Okay, got to have a ladder. And so I want you to imagine, let's see, where will we go? I told you yesterday I work with the Sudanese a lot. And because, just like here, the Sudanese have a lot of languages. In fact, they have more languages than in the Balkans. In fact, there are 253 ethnic groups in the Sudan.
Wow.
I mean, think about that. That's a lot of conflict, potentially, right? A lot of potential conflict. And so they have lots of languages. They have almost every tribe has its own tribal language. Regions have their languages. And all an inference is a conclusion that I draw from someone else's behavior. Now, somebody's got to get me down from here. How do I get off the ladder of inference?
Someone can push you.
They can shoot me. That's right. Put him out of his misery. They can push me off. How do you get off the ladder of inference? What do you do? Step by step. Okay, so how do I do? What do I have to do that?
Challenge your beliefs.
Challenge my conclusions. Yeah, challenge my beliefs. I've just created this new set of beliefs about these people. Maybe I need to challenge them. And so maybe what I need to do is walk all the way down and go back to the very first inference. I've got to trace my steps. Now, how did I get here? Well, I drew these inferences one after the other. Maybe I should go back to the very first inference, right? Now, if someone has said something or done something that pushes you up the ladder of inference, what's the best way to find out what their real intention was?
Go and ask them.
You ask them.
Go ask them, right? So, okay, so I walk up to Mabruk and I say, hey, Mabruk, yesterday, I sat down at breakfast and, I don't want to make too big a deal of this, but, I got to know what was going on because you guys kept talking Arabic. And it kind of hurt my feelings. I'm sitting there at breakfast and, don't have anybody to talk to and y'all kept talking Arabic. What was going on? What was that about? Now, think about it. What are the options of what he's going to say to me? Now, it might be that he says, I really don't like you. Okay, that's a possibility. That's a risk that I have to take, right? But the bigger risk is to keep on climbing the ladder of inference without any real evidence for it. So what if I had this conversation and say, so Mabruk, what was going on? You were talking Arabic, kind of hurt my feelings. He said, oh, Randy, I'm so sorry. I meant to come talk to you. We were having a private conversation. It was very confidential. One of these guys was sharing with us his experience as a child soldier. And it was the first time he's talked about it. And because of being here at the workshop, he was willing to share something very personal. But we didn't feel like we could switch to English because he might not, maybe he wasn't ready to share it with just anybody because we're close to him. We've made friends. We're in the same small group. Well, now all of a sudden, I have a completely different point of view, right? I have a completely different understanding of what just occurred. Because instead of climbing the ladder of inference, drawing all my conclusions about these people, right, I climbed back down and I took the time to find out. So remember the ladder of inference. Because I promise you, this happens all the time. Am I right?
Yes.
Right? I've been married 37 years. It happens in my house between me and my wife. Right? Or I'll give you an example. Like last night, I've had to climb down the ladder of inference. I sent my wife an email telling her, hey, honey, I made it. I'm okay. Terribly tired. Talk to you tomorrow. End of email. And I get an email back. Okay? So I can climb all kinds of inferences. She doesn't love me anymore. Right? She didn't even send me an email back. Now, I know better than that. Actually, my next inference is, I hope she's okay. But I also figure I would have heard about it because I got a Facebook message from somebody she works with, and they would have told me, she didn't come today. But it happens all the time. Right? It's going to happen here. You're going to be in small groups. Somebody's going to say something, and you just go up the ladder. There they go. I knew they were like that. Those dying, fill in the blank. Right? Whatever label you want to use. Right? So here's what I want you to do. I want you to now turn to your partner, and I want you to take 1 minute and take turns. I want you to explain what an inference is and what it means to climb the ladder of inference. Okay? 1 minute. Turn to each other, and you can use your own language. If you're sitting next to somebody who speaks your language, I want you to put this into your own words. Okay? What did you just hear about what it means to climb the ladder of inference? 1 minute. Okay?
So later on the business,
Okay, so what's the first of the skills or practices that we use to enable generative dialogue? Listening. And we have two tools that we use, among others. There's lots of other things we can talk about. But the two tools, what's the first one? Mind the gap. What's the second one? Remember the ladder of inference. Okay. The second practice that enables, what happened to my thing? Here we go. The second practice that enables generative dialogue is respect. It's respecting others. And it's funny that we should have to work at this so hard. But I think it's just part of the culture that we now live in. And I think this is a culture that's worldwide. A rule, are you willing to follow it? Right? If you're getting ready to put some restriction on someone else, are you willing to be similarly restricted? Right? So respecting is something that has to be active. It's not passive. It's not the absence of rudeness. It's the presence of something else. So it's not just a passive act. The root word of this English word respect comes from the Latin respicere, and it meant to look again. Now think about that. Do you ever hear the saying, you can't judge a book by its cover? You've heard that? Should you judge people by their cover?
No.
By the surface of what you see? Maybe you don't like the way they wear their hair. Maybe it's a little different, a little strange. Maybe they dress a little different, right? Maybe their accent's kind of crazy. You know? Kind of reminds me of, I got to spend 1 week at Harvard. Okay, I'm very homegrown, very provincial. Went to Houston Baptist University, went to University of Houston Law School, and finally I got to go to Harvard for a week. It was amazing, and I can't tell you how excited I was to get to be at Harvard for 1 week. And I went up there for the negotiation workshop. I was there 15 minutes, and I was with my little, they put us in our small groups immediately, almost at the very beginning of the thing. And I found myself sitting next to a rather beautiful young woman from Brazil. And this young lady spoke wonderful English, okay? And we've been talking for a few minutes, and well, hi, where are you from? I'm from Houston. Where are you from? I'm from Brazil, da da da. And finally she stops her, she puts her hand over my arm, and she says, "May I ask you a question?" And I said, "Sure. Are you from Alabama?" And I said, "No, why do you ask?" "Well, that's funny because you sound just like Forrest Gump." And I just looked back and I said, "Welcome to Harvard, Forrest." Life is like a box of chocolates. You never know what you're going to get. And, and she would, and for a moment there I thought, is she judging me by my accent? She thinks I'm stupid just because I drawl, just because I have this Texas twang and drawl, right? So we do that to each other all the time. So respect is looking again, right? Now, I did have the last laugh that week because I ended up being the person who got to negotiate with Roger Fisher in front of the whole group at the end of the thing. So Forrest sort of had the last laugh, right? But, you got to look again. And so many times, if I don't look again, I'm going to miss an opportunity. I'm going to miss an opportunity, one, to make a new friend. I'm going to miss an opportunity to learn from you, right? And for us to learn from each other. Because all of us have something to contribute. All of us have, we're all here with something unique to contribute to our world. And the question is, am I going to give you a chance to do it, and are you going to give me a chance to do it? Am I going to look again? So it came to mean honoring or deferring to someone. So now how do we do that in the group? Because you can create, by the way, I changed the word here because I noticed that I had this word catalyzing, which is sort of an interesting word. It's a chemical word for, a catalyst is something that creates something that causes a reaction. And so how do we create respect in our small groups? How do we do that? One way to do that is to support people who challenge the thinking of the group. Okay? The group may be rocking along, saying something, and finally somebody says, "You know what, I'm just not buying any of that." Well, one reaction to that is to immediately say, "What's wrong with you? Oh my gosh, go along with the group." But what we need to do, if we're going to show respect, is to create a deliberate space for those people who defer. Give them some airtime, right? Give them an opportunity to talk to us. And we need to maintain some space for inquiry, for questions, right? For deliberately living in the question. We're going to talk a lot about that in just a moment. And along the way, we have to learn to hold the tension. Because once there's some disagreement in the group, it feels kind of weird, doesn't it? It's like, oh my gosh, there's tension here, but we're not all on the same page. We're not all agreeing to go. And we got to remember that it's okay to hold on to that tension. Sometimes that tension is good. A lot of us want to live stress-free lives, but actually there's some forms of stress that are really good, If I didn't feel a little stressed about getting up tomorrow morning, going to the office, making a living, my family wouldn't eat. There's a good kind of stress there. So not all stress is bad. Not all tension is bad. There's healthy stress and healthy tension. And this is a healthy each other and you say something I disagree with, instead of suspending and slowing down my response, right? Instead of jumping up the ladder of inference, right? What I need to do is say, no, I'm not going to judge this quickly, right? I'm not going to pass judgment on this person or on this person's ideas. So how do we go about doing that? The path to dialogue is if you think about it, a dialogue is like a conversation. Now in a conversation, if you and I went for a walk and we had a conversation, only I did all the talking, did we have a conversation?
Monologue.
We had a monologue.
We had a dialogue, we had a monologue.
That's right. That's a good way of putting it. And so, and in fact, it's interesting, literally the Latin root word for this English word conversation, it meant turn together. And so when you have a good conversation, you take turns. You give each other a chance to talk, right? But as we listen to each other as we take turns, we deliberate, we make choices, right? And so we reach what we might call a choice point. So here's a little diagram that describes that. You say something that I'm not sure I agree with. And in fact, I'm pretty sure I disagree. So what I tend to do is quit listening to you and immediately go to defend in my own mind. Inside my head, what I immediately start thinking about is how I'm going to prove you wrong. And so what I do is I insist on remaining absolute in my certainty, right? Because I'm certain you've got to be wrong, And particularly if I figured out how to put a label on you, right? Oh, I just found out this person's a conservative. Oh my God. Oh my God, this person's a liberal. Oh my God, Republican. Oh my God, Democrat, right? And then automatically, big stamp comes out and I go, boom, pop it on your forehead, and I've got you all figured out, and that you're completely wrong and I'm completely right, and I haven't heard another word you said because I'm stuck over here in defend. So I have to make a deliberate decision to move up here, to suspend my judgment, relax my grip on my position long enough to hear you out, right? And to listen to what you have to say. And so the absence of suspending or suspension is certainty. I'm stuck in my certainty, which means I can never learn anything, right? There's nothing new to learn. I've had life figured out since I was 17 years old. I don't have to listen to you, right? And it's interesting, even that word certainty, if you go back to the root word, it meant to determine, to distinguish, and it came to mean rigidity about a distinction. I become rigid and inflexible in my thinking. And to have no flexibility in one's certainty is for sure to be excessively proud.
Could you go back one?
Yeah.
Sure. Yep. Do you guys have this one?
No.
Oh, you don't have it?
No.
Wow, really?
No, really? We have a different written.
Oh, you have something different?
Yeah.
All my district group.
I must have decided to expand it last night.
Yes.
Okay. You'll get these. I promise. We'll reprint them. Yeah, we'll reprint them.
Just by the last one.
Are we ready?
Just pass and
No.
pass it.
Okay.
All put our emails, so it's not a problem to send us.
Oh, we'll print them out and give them out to everybody like later today. Won't we, team? Where's my printer team? Yeah. Okay.
Go, Jessica.
Yo, Jessica, are you printer today?
No, it's me.
Well, wow.
I told.
Are you talking to me? Okay. Can I press this button?
Yes.
What will happen if I press this button?
Kaboom.
Practice 4.
Okay, here we go. So, what this means though, is suspending doesn't mean giving up your beliefs. Okay? It's not, sometimes we have a tendency to go to absolutes on one side or the other. It's either black or it's white. It's either A or it's not A, right? And so we haven't said drop your certainty. We just said relax your grip on it a little bit. Hold it lightly, right? Don't hold it so tight that you can't listen to somebody else. And so this is not about suppressing your own opinion, but it's also not about advocating with unilateral conviction, right? In other words, you don't have any, defend. I'm gonna tell you how wrong you are. Instead, suspending is about displaying our thinking in a way that others can see it and understand it. So think about it this way. The word suspend comes from suspendere, again, Latin, and it literally meant hang below, okay? For something to hang below. And the Indo-European roots of that were to draw, to stretch, or to spin, okay? Now, so think about it this way. Imagine that we're all standing in a big circle, and we'll never learn from each other. And if we don't learn together, I promise you, we're going to fall together. And the world's going to get worse. So I have to be willing not only to examine your ideas, I have to be willing to have my own ideas examined. So that means I got to be willing to hear you say, tell me more. Help me understand that. And I've got to be willing to take the time to do that. And if in case you're worried that, oh my gosh, but in doing this, I might be contaminated. My thinking might get screwed up. Oh my gosh, does this mean there's no such thing as real truth? Well, see, I actually believe there really is truth. I think there is absolute truth. I just don't think any one of us, and me for sure, I don't have an absolute grasp on it, right? I don't know everything there is to know about everything. I mean, and any person who thinks they do, I'm a little worried about you, right? I'm a wee bit worried.
We should
And-
ask Dalai Lama.
I'm sorry?
We should ask Dalai Lama.
Ask the Dalai Lama. That's right. Or this is, how many of you saw the, oh gosh, what is it? Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, the movie, remember? And they asked the big supercomputer.
Yep.
What was the, tell me
I cannot.
Elvis, do you remember? What was the question they asked the big computer?
I'm sorry.
It was like, what is the meaning of life?
What is the meaning of life?
Is that what it was?
What is the ultimate meaning of life?
What is the ultimate meaning of life? And how many thousands of years did the computer do its thing? And finally they all show up. And what was the computer's answer? It was like
42.
42. Right. Okay. The real truth can survive examination. Yes, ma'am.
Yeah, I mean, I'm looking at these things,
Yes.
especially on when we did certainty.
Yeah.
And we pose our views and we listen selectively, we fear and defend against new ideas. And I recognize myself so well, and I hate it. But the reason is because I wasn't prepared to think enough. And
Right.
I was uncertain about my own conclusions, and therefore you have to fight hard.
That's a
You don't want
thank
to
you.
listen.
Did y'all hear what she's saying?
Thought it.
Say it again.
I said I fought hard for my my ideas and shouted over people because I hadn't thought them through carefully enough, and I wasn't sure enough of my conclusions, so I had to shout that.
That is so important, what you just said, Phyllis. Thank you for that. Because what that means is that I can't have the courage to do this, to suspend and have my own ideas examined, because I know because I feel insecure, right? I'm not really secure in my beliefs, and very likely what I'm worried about is, however, it's those beliefs that unite me to my group. My belonging to the group is part of that is we all know, quote, what we believe, right? And if I am, my identity is threatened when I'm in a group situation and suddenly someone will help me understand that. Well, if I don't really understand it myself, it's just something I've accepted because the group told me this is what I'm supposed to believe and what I'm supposed to think. It's all intertwined with my identity, and it's what we talked about yesterday. You can have an identity quake, right? You can suddenly find yourself. Let me give you an example. Now that we're on this about it. Okay, I don't know if this got any attention outside of the country, but in our country, about a year ago, there was an event in Cambridge, Massachusetts. There was two African American men were seen forcing a door open, the front door of a residence at 2 o'clock in the afternoon in Cambridge. And a neighbor saw this happening and called the Cambridge police. And so, of course, the police immediately went to that house, walked into the living room and confronted these two African American men that were in the living room of this house. Show me, what are you guys doing here? Show me your identification. Immediately, one of the African American men said, I am Professor Lewis Gates. I own this house. Okay? And what are you doing here? Well, I'm with the police. A break-in was called. Now, at this moment, you would think, okay, so everything's going to be okay, right?